Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about how Illinois schools support students that experience homelessness, focusing on the McKinney-Vento Act and the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. We'll cover what homelessness can look like in schools, what responsibilities districts and staff have, and then we'll cover some real-life examples of how students get the support they need to stay in school and be successful. By the end, I hope that you'll have a better idea of the challenges that these students face and how students help make sure every student has a fair chance at an equitable education. When we talk about homeless students in schools, we mean those that don't have a fixed, regular, and adequate place to sleep at night. This can include students that are staying with friends or relatives, staying in shelters, or in temporary or unstable living conditions. Homelessness in public schools means that students often move frequently, and that can definitely disrupt learning. These students might have limited access to school supplies, technology, and other resources, and they can also face social emotional challenges like stress or anxiety, which can definitely be apparent in the school setting. Schools are required to provide immediate enrollment, transportation, and equal access to all educational opportunities, no matter where a student is living. Homelessness matters in schools because it can disrupt attendance, lower academic performance, and affect a student's emotional well being, making it harder for them to succeed in the classroom. According to ISBE's statewide reporting, 73,119 students identified as McKinney-Vento eligible in Illinois in the 2023-24 school year. This was reported as the highest number ISBE had identified to date and a notable increase over prior years. Given that data, it's definitely important to understand homelessness in Illinois and how we can support these students in our classes. Speaking of McKinney-Vento, this was signed into law by President Ronald Reagan on July 22, 1987. It was a significant federal response to homelessness in the United States and established programs to provide assistance to homeless populations. It serves as a framework for federal programs that offer housing, supportive services, and other assistance to people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is a federal law that addresses homelessness broadly, and it provides funding and support services for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. Within this law is the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program, which specifically ensures that homeless students have equal access to public education, which includes enrollment, transportation, and support services. In Illinois public schools specifically, these laws are important because they require districts to identify homeless students, remove barriers to learning, and help ensure educational stability, which is critical for student success despite housing instability. In addition to that, the Illinois State Board of Education requires every district to follow McKinney-Vento by designating a homeless liaison, providing immediate enrollment and transportation, ensuring access to free meals and Title I services, and regularly assessing student needs and compliance. In Illinois, homeless students and families sued Chicago Public Schools and the state for failing to provide immediate enrollment, transportation, and educational services. This was the Salazar versus Edwards 1992 case. The court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, reinforcing that the homeless students have a legal right to education under the Education for Homeless Children Act and McKinney-Vento. As a result, districts strengthened policies, trained staff, and increased accountability to ensure all homeless students receive equal access to educational opportunities. Each district appoints a homeless liaison to ensure compliance with McKinney-Vento and state laws, serving as the main contact for families, students, and staff. Schools communicate policies and provide training on enrollment, transportation, and fee waivers. Guidance comes from handbooks, policy manuals, and superintendent communications. And even though most districts follow McKinney-Vento guidelines, local practices might vary in documentation, transportation, or available resources. Speaking of that, I have a chart that compares the Chicago Public Schools with the Southwest Cook County Cooperative for Special Education, just giving you a comparison between districts and a cooperative. While they both aim to support homeless students, they definitely operate a little bit differently. CPS, for example, directly manages the STLS program, which is Students in Temporary Living Situations, and that ensures immediate enrollment, transportation, fee waivers, and staff training. And on the other hand, SWCASE collaborates with their member districts to provide enrollment, special education services, transportation, and professional development. Because SWCASE is a cooperative and they work with multiple districts, they kind of lean on the districts for those things. Both use clear communication channels even though CPS relies on handbooks and manuals. SWCASE uses mostly their meetings and newsletters to communicate this information. Speaking of communication and stakeholders when dealing with a homeless student, it's super important to remember that this information is confidential and not everybody needs to know. Only essential staff should be aware of a student's homeless status. So this can include the homeless liaison, transportation and meal staff, and any other personnel directly involved in supporting the student's educational needs. So this can be social workers, counselors, paraprofessionals, administrators, but like I said, only staff that are directly working with the student and need to know what's going on with them. Staff should be notified immediately upon enrollment, especially case managers and social workers, or identification as homeless. And again, whenever support is needed, such as for transportation, tutoring, or extracurricular activities. Like I said, information must be shared confidentially only with those who need it, using private communication channels like secure emails or restricted meetings. You never want to communicate about this information over text or in the hallway or casual conversation because we want to be accordance with FERPA and district policies. At no time should a student status be disclosed publicly, like in class or on any posted documents. When talking about supporting homeless students, there's a chart here that summarizes the key responsibilities that educators have toward homeless students on the left, and then best practices that we can follow on the right to ensure their success. We want to make sure that we're combining these responsibilities and proactive strategies so that we can create a safe and supportive learning environment for our students. Just some of the things to note, some responsibilities are ensuring transportation to and from the school, providing access to academic supports, fee waivers, extracurricular activities, maintaining confidentiality and enrollment immediately without proof of residency. And then some best practices, identifying students early that are in temporary housing, collaborating with homeless liaisons, social workers, and shelters. That's a huge piece that we'll talk about in an example next. Keeping trauma-informed and culturally competent approaches, and then monitoring and supporting students as they go on. Here's a real example that I faced in my school with a student, just to give some background and how to support these students when things occur. This student experienced sudden homelessness and temporarily stayed with family, friends, and community members. Under McKinney-Vento, the district did provide transportation, even though it was a 1-hour commute to and from school, and it was out of our district, in order to maintain school stability. When her temporary housing ended, the school worked really hard with her state caseworker and a ton of local agencies to place her in a shelter and then later in a group home. Because her temporary housing ended kind of like without a lot of notice, we had to place her in emergency housing initially while we searched for some group homes that would accept her. Um, we wanted to make sure that she could continue attending school consistently despite being out of district. This case highlights the importance of connecting with community resources and understanding legal responsibilities and best practices to ensure that homeless students receive the support they need to succeed academically and socially. Helping students find stable housing can be an overwhelming challenge for sure, since schools are not housing agencies and families often face barriers that extend way beyond what educators can solve. That's why it's essential to know your resources, to build strong community connections, and follow the McKinney-Vento Act so that at the very least, students can access their right to education, transportation, and daily meals at school. While you might not be able to fix every part of their situation, you can make a difference by ensuring that when they are in your care at school, they feel safe, supported, and seen. With that being said, I did leave a list of resources and support for homeless students in Illinois. I separated them by category so it was easier to differentiate between them. There are some educational and legal resources and agencies. Um, all of these links are there for you guys to access if you want to or ever find yourself in that situation where you need to help a student that becomes homeless or is homeless and is in your care at school. There's housing and shelter, and then there is community and family support services. So, like I said, finding the students housing isn't necessarily your responsibility as an educator, but you might find yourself in some situations where you want to help and support these students and give them the resources that they need. And so, here are just a ton of resources that were helpful in that situation with that student that I had. Based on all that information, I have a scenario for you with some discussion questions. The scenario is a 16-year-old student in your high school has been increasingly withdrawn and arriving late to school or leaving school early consistently. You notice the following signs. He's wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row. He is tired all the time. He often puts his head down in class and falls asleep. And he seems reluctant to participate in any classroom activities. Recently, the student casually mentioned staying with a friend's family because he has nowhere else to go. Knowing that students experiencing homelessness might face significant challenges, including transportation, difficulty accessing school supplies, limited access to meals, and emotional stress. You also know the student is at risk of falling behind academically if interventions are not provided promptly. As an educator, you want to act in compliance with McKinney-Vento and Illinois law, ensuring that the students' educational rights are protected while connecting them with the appropriate supports. So, my discussion questions for you are number one, how would you confirm the student's homeless status, and what are the first actions that you should take? So that includes who should you contact within your school or district. That could be a homeless liaison, counselor, administrator, social worker. I would encourage you to look within your school district to see what's clearly outlined in the handbook, or if you know the people that you should be connecting with, refer to that. And then number two, once the student is identified, what steps can you take to ensure access to immediate enrollment, transportation, academic supports, and community resources while maintaining confidentiality and stability in their education? This will be posted on the discussion board post too, as well. And then I just have references. If you guys need access to any of these or if any of the links don't work, just reach out to me and I can send them your way. And that is it. Thank you.